You know that feeling when you're, like, hanging out on the playground, maybe kicking wood chips around by the swings, and someone starts telling a story?
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. It always starts out pretty normal.
Right. Like, it begins totally grounded in reality. A kid says, "Hey, I ran super fast during recess today." But then, that competitive edge kicks in.
Someone else always has to chime in and top it,
Exactly. Someone goes, "Oh, yeah, well, I ran so fast my shoes caught on fire."
which is, obviously impossible.
Totally impossible. And before you know it, the logic completely breaks down. Suddenly, someone is claiming they ran so fast, they traveled back in time, high-fived a T-Rex, and, like, made it back before the bell rang.
It's the classic game of one-upmanship. The truth just gets stretched so thin that it snaps.
Yeah, and suddenly you were completely untethered from reality. But, I mean, we do it because it gets a reaction, right? It gets a laugh, and it makes the world feel just a little bit larger than life.
And that playground dynamic is actually the perfect entry point for what we are exploring today.
It really is. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We have a fantastic stack of sources on the table for you, and our focus today is specifically designed for our younger listeners, so get ready for a really fun ride.
We're looking at an outrageously fun, totally impossible children's book called Thunder Rose.
Yes. Written by Jardine Nolan with these incredible illustrations by Kadir Nelson. And alongside the book, we also have some really fascinating notes on frontier folklore.
Our mission today is to pull apart the secret ingredients of a wildly entertaining genre of story, which is the tall tale.
So if you aren't super familiar, a tall tale is a type of traditional literature. It grew straight out of the American frontier.
We're talking about the era of pioneers, wide open plains and seemingly endless wilderness.
And these stories always lean heavily on, like, a few main things, a very specific brand of dry humor, events that just completely defy physics, and characters with superhuman abilities.
Which brings us back to that playground story about your shoes catching on fire, because there's actually a fancy literary term for that kind of super stretching of the truth.
Oh, right, hyperbole.
Exactly, hyperbole.
Yeah.
It simply means using massive exaggeration. You aren't doing it to lie to anyone. You're just doing it for emphasis or for a really funny effect.
Like when you drop your backpack after a long day at school and say, "Ugh, my backpack weighs 1,000,000 pounds."
Right. You don't literally mean you're carrying 1,000,000 pounds of paper. You're using hyperbole to make a point about how tired you are.
I love hyperbole because it forces you to really use your imagination. And in Tall Tales, hyperbole isn't just sprinkled in. It's like the entire foundation of the universe.
Which brings us to Rose, the star of our story. Her arrival into the world sets the tone immediately.
It really does. I actually want to read directly from the very beginning of the book because the imagery is just so striking. So, wherever you are, close your eyes and picture this.
Okay, setting the scene.
Rose was the first child born free and easy to Jackson and Millicent Magruder. I recall most vividly the night she came into this world.
A very dramatic opening.
Right. It goes on. Hailing rain, flashing lightning, and booming thunder pounded the door, inviting themselves in for the blessed event.
The storm is literally inviting itself inside.
I know. And then, taking in her first breath of life, the infant did not cry out. Rather, she sat up and looked around. She took hold of that lightning, rolled it into a ball, and set it above her shoulder while the thunder echoed out over the other.
Which is just wildly impossible.
Totally impossible. And the paragraph finishes with, "They say this just accentuated the fact that the child had the power of thunder and lightning coursing through her veins."
That opening does so much heavy lifting for the story. When you read a tall tale, part of the fun is actively looking for actions that are entirely improbable.
Yeah, and sitting up on day one to casually play with lightning is the ultimate improbable action. Think about the reality of a normal newborn baby.
They're incredibly fragile. They sleep, they cry, they need constant care.
Exactly. Comparing a normal baby to baby Rose is just mind-boggling. It would be like watching a newborn wake up, do 3 perfect Olympic-level backflips out of their crib, walk into the kitchen, and, like, casually flip their own blueberry pancakes on the stove.
That is a great visual. It completely shatters your expectation of what a baby is supposed to do.
Right. Instead of reaching for a pacifier, she reaches for a 30,000-degree bolt of electricity and just rolls it into a ball like it's Play-Doh.
And the author's word choice there is really deliberate. The text says the thunder and lightning accentuated her power.
Accentuate. That's a great vocabulary word.
It is. To accentuate something means to highlight it or draw sharp attention to it. The storm was basically acting as a giant flashing neon sign pointing at this baby.
Telling the reader, hey, Rose is a force of nature herself.
Exactly. And this ties directly into why pioneers told these stories in the first place. The frontier was terrifying. The weather could destroy your home. Animals could be dangerous.
So by inventing characters who could literally grab a storm with their bare hands, people found a way to laugh at the very things that frightened them.
That's the core of frontier folklore right there.
That context makes so much sense. You invent a hero who is bigger than your biggest fears. But I actually want to challenge something about her characterization here.
What's that?
Well, the text goes on to tell us that baby Rose is extremely polite. She speaks to the doctor, telling him she is much obliged, which is a fancy way of saying thank you.
Right, very good manners.
And the book describes her as having the sweetest disposition. Yet in the same breath, we learn she drinks her milk straight from the cow.
And not just leaning under the cow.
Oh,
Right?
she literally lifts the entire massive animal completely over her head to drink from it. So my question is, if she is this unstoppable, superhuman powerhouse, why write her as a sweet, polite little girl? Why not just make her a wild, chaotic monster?
Because a chaotic monster isn't actually funny in this context. Yeah, the humor in a tall tale relies entirely on contrast. You have these wildly unlikely destructive events.
Like a baby bench pressing livestock.
Exactly. Placed right next to a very straightforward, polite, down-to-earth personality. The author even warns the reader, don't let yourself be misled.
Ah, so she might look pretty and have excellent manners, but she is quite literally made of thunder.
Right, that deadpan delivery of something totally absurd is what gives the genre its charm.
It's like watching a superhero politely apologize to a wooden door before accidentally ripping the entire building off its foundation. It just works so well.
And this polite powerhouse doesn't stay a baby for long.
No, she does not. The story moves chronologically, tracking her life as she grows up crazily fast. Let me read what happens when Rose hits the terrible twos.
This is a fun part.
Okay, it says. The 2-year-old became quite curious about the pile of scrap iron lying next to the barn. Rose took a good-sized piece, stretched it here, bent and twisted it there.
Just casually bending metal.
Right. She constructed a thunderbolt as black as pitch to punctuate her name. She called it coal. And then, just a few pages later, she's older, and her mom asks what she did to the wire fence.
And Rose has the best response.
She says, oh, that. While I was staking the fence, Pa asked me to keep little Barbara J company. That little twisty pattern seemed to make the baby laugh, so I like to think of it as Barbara's wire.
The pacing of her childhood is just a masterclass in hyperbole.
It really is. At 5 years old, she does what the book calls a commendable job staking a fence.
Which means it was highly praiseworthy, like expert-level work.
Yeah, and by 8, she's not playing with wooden blocks. She is building actual skyscrapers out of heavy iron beams.
And by 12, she is forging her own branding iron. Not to mention, she invents barbed wire, a literal staple of the American West, just to entertain a crying baby.
It's amazing. Think about what it feels like to sit in art class, right? You grab one of those fuzzy, colorful pipe cleaners.
Oh yeah, the super bendy ones.
Exactly. With just 2 fingers, you can twist it into a little dog or a crown, and it offers 0 resistance.
Right, it's totally effortless.
Well, Ruth is doing that exact same motion, but she's doing it with solid, heavy, rusted scrap iron. To a 2-year-old Rose, twisting solid steel is as effortless as bending a piece of fuzzy yarn.
And she really needs that physical prowess because the frontier doesn't give you a break. The story soon introduces a classic Western conflict.
A massive cattle stampede.
Yes. A herd of quick-tempered longhorn steer is charging straight toward her front door.
And a stampede is no joke. Longhorn steers are enormous animals. Some of them have horns that stretch 8 feet from tip to tip.
And when hundreds of them are panicking and running together, the ground literally shakes.
But Rose doesn't flinch. She takes that iron thunderbolt she made coal and uses it like a pole vault to launch herself high into the dusty air.
And she lands squarely on the back of the biggest, meanest led steer, a massive bull she names Tater.
And she just uses her raw muscle to twist him to a complete halt.
But look at what happens immediately after she physically stops him. Raw strength halts his momentum, but it doesn't solve the panic of the rest of the herd.
Oh, that's true.
To do that, she doesn't wrestle him to the dirt. She begins humming a little tune. She sings him a lullaby.
Wait, she sings to the giant angry cow?
She does. The author writes that this cantankerous, grumpy ton of beef became as playful as a kitten and even tried to purr.
A purring cow. That is hilarious.
The music literally puts the creature to sleep. And this is a very subtle deviation from your standard tall tale.
How so?
Well, usually these stories are purely about physical domination. You beat the river, you punch the mountain. But here, Rose uses her physical strengths to get in position and then uses her music to actually resolve the conflict.
So she has this hidden musical side, a sort of gentle empathy that balances out the muscle.
Exactly.
But, I mean, the muscle is definitely still her primary tool for navigating the world. Because after she stops the stampede, she has to drive this massive herd of cattle all the way up to Abilene.
And you can't have a story about the frontier without some outlaws causing trouble.
Definitely not. I'm going to read you how she handles them. Using the spare metal rods she always carried with her, Rose lassoed those hot-tempered hooligans up good and tight.
Just rounding them up.
She dropped them all off to jail, tied up in a nice, neat iron bow. It wasn't any trouble at all, she told Sheriff Weaver. Somebody had to put a stop to their thieving ways.
She treats a dangerous gang of outlaws led by Jesse Baines like they are nothing more than a minor